In 2004, the accomplished Italian marathoner Stefano Baldini joined the pantheon of the global sporting elite by taking home the gold medal at the Athens Olympic Games. His success was the result of a lifetime of training and dedication, but it was not without controversy, for with just 10 kilometers left in the race, the lead runner, Brazilian Vanderlei de Lima, was attacked by a deranged protester warning that the apocalypse was nigh. De Lima was wounded in the attack and ended up finishing third, leading to an official protest by the Brazilian Olympic Committee and a claim by some that Baldini should return his medal or that an asterisk be placed next to his name in the official logs. The Brazilian contention was that De Lima would have won had he been able to finish the race. A rather preposterous claim, but, as it would turn out, one for which there was actually a very distant precedent. Baldini would keep his medal and the immortality that comes with being an Olympic champion. Decades later, few even remember the controversy, for in the storied history of the Olympic Games, it seems that hardly a single edition of the competition is held without some scandal erupting. But before you take the controversial nature of the modern games as a sign of slipping morality and a failure to uphold the virtues of the classical past, we must remember that the ancient games were not without their fair share of controversy. For no Olympic Games, ancient or modern, could rival the spectacle or the scandal associated with the Games of '67. These games were unlike any other and featured the single most dominant display by a participant in history, albeit one that comes with a significant asterisk attached. These were the Games of Nero, and the Roman emperor took home an incredible 7 victor's crowns, the ancient equivalent of the gold medal. He emerged victorious in every event in which he participated, an amazing accomplishment which of course was only a reflection of the emperor's immense athletic and artistic prowess, for it was certainly not a possibility that any of these competitions were rigged. Like many Olympic champions, Nero's wins in the games were probably the crowning, no pun intended, achievement of his life. He was a deep admirer of Greek culture and had a lifelong love of performing for the crowd. But it was this desire to win the approval of the masses through showmanship and performance, rather than as an upright ruler, that would alienate Rome's elite and ultimately spell doom for Nero and the Julio-Claudian line. The Olympics were famous across the classical world, representing the pinnacle of Greek ideas about culture, athleticism, and religion, all of which Nero was completely infatuated with. His passion for Hellenism and his vanity, combined with the unchecked power he wielded as emperor, made it possible for him to fulfill the lifelong dream of not just participating in the Olympics, but dominating them as an unprecedented champion. Nero's Olympics were unique, not just because they were the first to feature a sitting emperor, but because from the very start they were conceived of and planned as a celebration of one man, not as a festival which honored the Olympian gods as had previously been the case. Nero even had the event rescheduled to '67 to coincide with his year-long tour of Greece, meaning that the games were held 2 years earlier than sacred tradition demanded. Cassius Dio notes that while other Romans came to Greece to conquer, Nero had come to perform. But he crossed over into Greece, not at all as Flaminius or Mummius or as Agrippa and Augustus his ancestors had done, but for the purpose of driving chariots, playing the lyre, making proclamations, and acting in tragedies. Rome, it seems, was not enough for him, nor Pompey's theater, nor the great circus, but he desired also a foreign campaign in order to become, as he said, victor in the grand tour. Rescheduling the games was simply confirmation that Nero was effectively inserting himself into the heart of the Greek pantheon by making himself the central figure of the games and so placing himself in the company of the gods. Though he was well versed in the classic Greek myths, he seemed to have missed the tales which discussed the dangers of hubris. Because he was thought to equal Apollo in music and the sun in chariot driving, he resolved also to imitate the achievements of Hercules, and they say that a lion was got ready for him to kill, either with a club or with a close hug, in view of the people in the amphitheater, which he was to perform naked. It goes without saying that a divine figure such as Nero, with talents that he believed rivaled Apollo and Hercules, could never lose to mere mortals, and so Nero was unsurprisingly named the victor in all his events, including those that were added specifically for him, such as lyre playing, singing, and acting. One wonders if he celebrated each crown with the traditional champion's acclamation of Axios, a Greek term that best translates as, "I am worthy." We don't know, but his behavior tells us that he at least deemed himself worthy, and his presence to the judges, as well as the potential implications of denying the unstable emperor what he desired, ensured that the judges found him worthy too. But at least the hedonistic Nero had the decency to avoid athletic events, such as foot races and javelin throwing. For just in case you are harboring any doubts that the crowns were all rigged in his favor, his victory in chariot racing confirms that the fix was in from the very beginning. Nero participated in multiple chariot races, including the quadriga, a chariot race where each chariot was drawn by 4 horses. However, his was pulled by 10 horses. Though on paper this should have given him an enormous advantage, it appears that this was too much horsepower for the emperor, and he lost control of his chariot, resulting in a crash that left him unable to finish the race. However, the officials were so benevolent that they opted to award him the crown on the grounds that he was so far ahead at the time of his crash that he would have won had the crash not occurred. Suetonius details the embarrassing affair. He also drove his chariot in many places, at Olympia, even a 10-horse team, although in one of his poems he had criticized Mithridates for just that thing. But after he had been thrown from the car and put back in, he was unable to hold out and gave up before the end of the course. But he received the crown just the same. Talk about a win that deserves an asterisk. Compared to this decision, Baldini's gold medal in 2004 doesn't even register. He had a lot to overcome in the category of Italians winning Olympic races in Greece under dubious circumstances. But while the decision to award Nero the victor's crown looks embarrassing in hindsight, Nero's perversion of the Olympic Games actually ended up benefiting all of Greece in the long run. During his year-long tour of the province, Nero competed in many local games and lavished wealth and even administrative privileges upon each town where he participated. Judges that appropriately recognized his genius were even rewarded with Roman citizenship. While there was no worse enemy than an unhappy emperor, Nero showed in Greece that there was no better friend than a joyful one. Nero was unsurprisingly a popular figure then in Greece, for of what concern were a few ruined competitions compared to the wealth and newfound autonomy he granted the province, as well as the privileges now open to its elite. The enthusiasm of the Greeks for Nero's showmanship was only matched by the adoration he received from the Roman common people for his performances. The masses of Rome had long been held at bay by bread and circuses, and they were glad to have an emperor who shared their fervor for chariot racing, theater, and music. When Nero returned from his year in Greece, he was welcomed by adoring masses, with his procession consciously modeled after a triumph, and lacking none of the requisite spectacle. Rome's elite, however, firmly disapproved of Nero's antics. To senators and other scions of generational wealth, Nero's participation in these competitions was debasing. After all, were acting, singing, and racing not the activities of slaves? Why was the emperor disgracing himself by behaving like such a low-born commoner? Though the rebellion of 68 and Nero's subsequent abandonment by the Senate cannot be pinned on their dissatisfaction with the games, the decision to neglect the empire for a year to compete in competitions across Greece certainly didn't strengthen Nero's hold on the throne. If you're enjoying this video, please do us a favor by liking, commenting, and subscribing. We're a small channel, and this is the only way to get the almighty YouTube algorithm to notice us. Furthermore, you can help Tribunate become more sustainable by becoming a member for as little as 99 cents a month. Thank you for all of your support. A deep wedge already existed between the Senate and Nero, but so long as the army remained loyal, they knew better than to openly defy him. Conspiracies to depose him had been quickly sniffed out, and those involved were swiftly punished. It was in the aftermath of one of these conspiracies that Nero ordered the death of the popular general Corbulo. In fact, it was in 67 that the general had been called away from his post on Rome's Parthian border to meet Nero in Greece. The war hero was summoned, compelled to abandon his duty, and then condemned to an ignominious end by an emperor who the Senate increasingly saw as unworthy of the throne. The contrast between the two men could hardly be more clear, and would only have been driven home by Corbulo's last words. For as the celebrated general unflinchingly fell on his sword, he would utter that powerful phrase so associated with triumph, honor, and the very spirit of the Olympics themselves. Axios was all he had to say, and it was all he needed to in order to capture just how far the Roman state had drifted from its republican traditions and past virtues. The most capable were no longer elevated. In fact, all of Rome's dominions now seemingly existed to make possible the pleasures of just one man. Nero's ability to act on his every desire stemmed from the unchecked power he held as emperor. The Roman Senate, once a powerful body that perceived itself as a bulwark against monarchy, had withered and been cowed into submission by decades of imperial rule and the violent purges of political enemies that occurred under Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. Having seen the consequences of resistance, no one dared to publicly question an emperor, even one as erratic and uncouth as Nero. The surplus resources of Rome and the absence of restraint on any of his whims granted Nero an opportunity that few others in history have enjoyed. Nero was utterly free. While there were, of course, many freeborn Romans, Nero's privileges and ability to indulge himself however he liked meant he was almost never subjected to any limitation except his own imagination. Every other Roman at some point came up against the boundaries of what was possible, due either to their wealth, social status, or familial connections. But after ascending to the throne, Nero never did. It was the worst thing that possibly could have happened to him. With the resources of the world's most powerful state at his personal disposal, all of Nero's desires, all his wants, could immediately be actualized. In this sense, he experienced such a degree of freedom that even we moderns can scarcely comprehend. It is little wonder that he began to think of himself as a god, and even less of a surprise that he was driven to madness, as he sought to perpetually outdo his past excesses. Nero had been granted the freedom to flourish into the exact individual he wanted to be, without any constraints upon his person, and he failed the test. His Olympic Games, which in his own mind at least were meant to celebrate his excellence, instead became a grotesque display of his narcissism, and instead of forging an eternal legacy for him, the games serve as the foremost example of the rot and emptiness at the core of his being. Fittingly, after his death just 1 year later, Nero's wins would be expunged from the official record books, and the offending judges even had to repay the gifts he had given them. It is easy for us, then, to condemn Nero as simultaneously one of the most villainous and one of the most cartoonish figures in history. And while I don't want to excuse any of his actions, we must reflect for a moment to consider whether or not we would have fared much better than him had we been born into such opulence and privilege, and then granted the throne of a global superpower at the age of 17. Nero is, of course, ultimately culpable for his misdeeds, but Aristotle issued a prescient warning about the dangers associated with freedom this absolute when he said, "Every man should be responsible to others, nor should any one be allowed to do just as he pleases. For where absolute freedom is allowed, there is nothing to restrain the evil which is inherent in every man." That's a dim view of human nature, but it is one that has been confirmed time and time again, whenever someone holds absolute power. For history has shown that no one reigns innocently.